Is Florida a conservative sinkhole? And first of all, that is not a rhetorical question or an insult, but a genuine question of, is the Republican advantage in Florida and the rate at which people are moving to and embracing that state as like a conservative paradise actually a bad thing in the long run for Republicans? Sinkhole in this political context essentially means a place where extra votes and extra support is kind of meaningless on like a presidential level, as it were. California is a perfect example of a Democratic sinkhole state in this election. More support and like more money going there is effectively wasted because the state has already been won by a pretty massive margin. Look, democracy is very valuable and it's hard to talk about people like probably wasting votes, but it is worth pointing out that if you have a state in a presidential election where it's winner take all, whoever gets the most votes wins, every vote more than your opponent, you are kind of wasting. The Democrats realistically have millions more votes than they actually need in the state of California, and they would much rather like a million of those people live in Wisconsin or Pennsylvania or Georgia or Michigan. And I don't necessarily think it will be a problem this election, but certainly if the trend continues and Florida becomes this state that is just soaking up conservative people from all across the country, there might be a point at which the votes there are practically speaking, from the perspective of the GOP, just wasted votes. Trump won Florida in 2020 by about 3 points, which is a pretty healthy margin for the state of Florida considering how much it was a swing state before 2016. And he's probably going to win it this time around by like a margin of 4 and several 100,000 votes. So when you hear that since like 2022, 30,000 people have moved from Pennsylvania to Florida, that shouldn't be good news if you're a Republican. And look, on the face of it, that seems like a good thing for Republicans, the state becoming more and more red. But at a certain point, you have to wonder, all the conservative people moving there, at what point do you start to say, oh, we would actually prefer it if they stayed in their swing states and kept voting Republican as opposed to coming here? And of course, it shouldn't be too surprising that the states with the most people have the most people moving to Florida. But I do think it's still worth paying attention to that of the states where the most people are moving to Florida in the top 10, the top 10 includes Texas, North Carolina, and Georgia. That is tens of thousands of people from North Carolina and Georgia that have been moving to Florida. And while Texas isn't a swing state like those two, it is a state where the margins have been getting more and more narrow over the years to the point in which it's around about 5%. You do not want tens of thousands of people moving to the conservative paradise when the margins are consistently getting smaller and smaller. Call the Electoral College whatever you want, whatever your opinions of it are. But one of the things that it does is that big states do get somewhat of a disadvantage and vote wasting in this system. And it looks like Florida is probably going to be an instance where that really hurts the Republicans. Now, Ron DeSantis really kicked this off when he took his approach to COVID as sort of like, I don't want to say hands off as it were, but he certainly tried to avoid the lockdowns, which most of the country was going through on a state level. And that brought a lot of conservatives into the state. And I can't stress enough how much he changed the dynamics of that state, because when you look at the numbers, it's kind of insane to believe. In 2018, Ron DeSantis won the governor's race in Florida by 0.5%. In an election where upwards of 8 million people voted, he didn't even win by 40,000. It was that narrow of a race only 6 years ago. In 2022, when the Democrats actually had a pretty surprisingly good showing in that election season, Florida really bucked the trend and went as red as you can possibly believe. In his re-election campaign that year, Ron DeSantis won by 20 points, 59-39. That is insane. To put it into perspective, it was the best showing for the Republicans in a governor's race in Florida since the Republican Party was founded in the 1850s. I won't lie though, Florida becoming a reliably Republican, bordering on like deep red state at this point is definitely a good thing for the Republican Party, and they should pat themselves on the back for it. But those electoral votes, while valuable and certainly important to like any Republican strategy going forward, are they worth it if it comes at the cost of the people that you're taking from these other states? the rate at which the conservative population in Florida has grown and that they have managed to get people to migrate there and make the state as reliable as it is incredibly impressive from like a political exercise standpoint. But is it worth it if you're risking Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and God forbid, even Texas